Welcome to the Steady On Stronger Together podcast. I am your host, Angie Ballman. Today's episode is an author interview with Erin Bartels, and my book-loving friends Lisa and Maria joined me to talk about Erin's most recent book, The Words Between Us. We talk a lot in the conversation about the ways that we try to run from our past and our desire to be seen and known. It will be obvious that we adored Erin's story, and we most certainly enjoyed our time getting to know her. Let's listen in. Good evening, Steady On friends. Welcome to our October virtual book club selection, where we are talking about The Words Between Us. At least always
I know, I was trying to get mine.
And the author is here, Erin. Okay, I should have asked before, Bartels or Bartels?
No, first one.
Bartels. Okay. All right. Awesome. I want to try. I think it's how do you get Bartels sometimes?
All the time.
All the time. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I meant to ask before we go, so I thought that I would seem like I knew already, but I didn't. But we are so delighted, Erin, to have you on with us as we're going to talk about this book. We have all loved it, and I've heard from some other people who've been reading it who love it, and so we're just so glad for you because it's like getting some well-deserved recognition, right?
Yeah.
Before I even introduce you, will you tell us just a couple of things that you've been nominated for or received?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, this book in particular just got nominated for the 2020 Christie Award in general fiction.
Cool. Yay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. So Erin is, her husband is Zachary, right? Do I have that right? And mom to one. How old is your kiddo? 12. All right.
Ooh.
And boy.
Yep.
Okay, you're in good company. We have 6 boys between the 3 of us.
Nice.
So we're all boy moms here this evening. So, and you live in Lansing, Michigan, right? And both of your books are set in Michigan, which we'll talk about just a little bit. And I was in your neck of the woods just this weekend, actually, for a family funeral. I have family in the Grand Rapids area in Allendale. I don't know if you know where that is, where Grand
I went to school in Allendale.
You did? Oh my goodness. Well, that's where I was this weekend. And so I thought, I have to tell you that because but I've spent lots of time in Allendale over in my life. So it was, it's beautiful there. Just beautiful. Yeah. So, so we are so delighted to have you. Erin's at erinbartels.com. I'll put that in the notes for sure. And you want to follow her and all that kind of good stuff. But before we even get started, here's what we have to do, the 3 of us. We have to start with a public apology. I was just briefly telling Erin this before we went live. So, some months ago, we tried to step up our game with the virtual book club, right? Like people were they were paying a little bit more attention and reading along with us and stuff, but we've gotten better. But we haven't always been very good at this. And certainly we never dreamed about inviting authors on, or that authors would even know what we said about their books. So y'all are trying to be a little bit more careful. But the first book that we did of Erin's was We Hope for Better Things. We did that earlier this year. We talked about it and adored it, loved it. But I just want to caution everyone, I wouldn't go find the interview or the discussion if you don't want to know everything that happened in the books, because we gave away everything and that's the wrong thing to do. And we're not going to do that tonight. So we've gotten better. So one, thanks for not knowing we did that. Because otherwise I'm like, she's never seen that, or she wouldn't have said yes to come.
No, I wouldn't have come.
Anyway, but we're just delighted to have you. And so I wondered, Erin, in your own words, would you just start us off and talk to us a little bit about just kind of the heart of this book, The Words Between Us? Tell us a little bit about it.
Absolutely.
But no spoilers.
No spoilers.
Well, she does it like it's okay.
I won't even tell you much about the plot. I actually, my full-time job is a copywriter, and I write the back cover copy and catalog copy and stuff for books. And so I'm always aware of not giving things away.
Well, we should have learned from you earlier.
So The Words Between Us is, it's a story told in 2 different timelines, now and then, and it follows a woman named Robin Windsor, who is definitely spending most of her life kind of running away from her past, running away from the reputation of her parents, and then running away from other things, and has spent just much of her life looking for a way to hide, in a way that she won't be noticed. And the modern day storyline happens at a used bookstore. It's set in a city called River City, which is based on my hometown, which is Bay City, Michigan. And in the then timeline, it's her when she first comes to that town as a 14-year-old. So there's a little bit of adult and teen, how did you become the person you eventually became? How did this person become this way? But I think fundamentally, it's the story of someone who is lost, who must ultimately allow herself to be found, and stop hiding from the past, stop hiding from the world, stop hiding from herself, and just be honest with people and with herself. And it's through an exchange of classic novels with someone who sees something of value in her that she begins to slowly learn to trust and deal with all of these things in her past.
It's a beautiful unfolding. The story is a beautiful unfolding, I think. I was listening to an interview with so Patty Callahan some months back was here, who wrote Becoming Mrs. Lewis. I don't know if you're familiar with her work on that. Yeah. And we liked that book so much. And she came on, and I was listening. She was presenting at a writers conference that I was virtually attending. And I was listening to her just today. And one of the things she said was about writing and finding the soul in the story. That was her point. And she said, for a character, it's important to, as a writer, to know the character, what the character wants, what they're trying to find, and then what's the lie that they're believing in their life that's preventing them from having that. And I wondered, maybe because I thought she was so spot on about that. Like, that's what connects us to a character. Like, we can feel that. So for Robin, who's the main character, what would you say, because she is running, and what would you say she wants to find? Is that a hard question?
No, that's a good question.
Yeah.
And I think she wants different things at different times of her life.
Sure.
But I think initially she wants something to not have happened. And I think that a lot of people have that experience. We all have things in our lives that we wished just didn't happen. And whether or not we deal with that and are able to move on, whether it's to forgive or to forgive yourself or whatever, that's a part of growth that sometimes people don't get to. They'll just continually be bitter about what happened to them. And that's how she kind of starts out when she's younger. But I think that as an adult, she really wants to find connection with people, but she doesn't trust people enough to do that. She's lonely, I think.
I was going to say belonging, which is something many people can relate to. A sense of belonging in some.
Definitely. Yeah, because she doesn't feel like she belongs really anywhere much of the time.
And I think, what do you think about this? I think she wants to be seen and known, but she's not able or willing to do what you have to do in order to be seen and known, right? Because like you said, because she's running from something or hiding something. Right. And so there's always this longing for people to see her or know her. But
well, I think that that's something that, I don't know if everybody feels this, but I feel that pretty deeply, that you have a feeling that you would like to be actually known by people. But we're in a time in our history where you can be known by everyone and nobody really knows you.
Yes.
So you could have 2,000 followers on Facebook, friends. They're not friends. They don't actually know you, and they always assume the worst about you and want to argue about things with you. And I recently went through this where I decided to separate out my actual personal life from my writing contacts that I had on Facebook. And I, this year, in 2 different waves, got rid of about 1,200 people.
Wow.
From my personal Facebook page. I have an author page. I'm happy to have people follow me there. But because it was just this feeling of, these people don't really know me. And I don't know that this is everything I want to share is going to land well with everyone. So I think that I definitely feel, and I'm an introvert. I present as an extrovert sometimes because that's convenient, and I'm a pastor's wife, and so you kind of have to do that sometimes. And when you're in writing circles, you're meeting new people all the time. So you do that. But ultimately, I only have a few really close friends, and you want to be known, but you also want your privacy. And I think that dichotomy that is, kind of, running against each other in your life is that's what's happening in Robin's life.
Yeah.
She really wants to be known, but she's really afraid to be known.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I know from reading your stuff that books are so important to you, obviously, not just as a writer, but as a reader too. Correct? Yeah. And they were so important to Robin in the story. And I just wondered, why do you think reading the stories and the journeys and struggles of other people really help us in ours? Why is that such a, I don't know, universal thing? I know not everybody's a reader, but so many of us, we find something in books. What's that about for you? And why do you think,
even if you're not a reader, I think you find that in movies or whatever. You find it in stories.
Yes.
Right?
Stories and stories. Yes.
Yeah. I think that a large part of it is knowing we're not alone in our struggles or our fears or our regrets, like realizing that whatever you're going through, it's not new. People have gone through it before, they've gotten through it, and that kind of tells you that I can get through it. And when you read stories, they always have a resolution of some sort, even if they're not all tied up in a bow. They do have a resolution. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and life is not like that. But I think that we wish it was more, where we could feel like things were kind of wrapped up. We have so many loose ends in our lives, and sometimes that bothers you. So I think that people like stories because of that. And for me personally, when I write, a lot of what I do when I write is figuring out what I believe about things. And so in order to really think through something, I have to write through it. So when I was in school, I took copious notes all the time. I would never read them again, but it was the taking of the notes that was meaningful to me. And I think the same thing with reading, where you often don't know quite what you feel about something until you read how somebody else has felt about something. And so I've actually brought a few books with me into the room here to show you some books from my own childhood. Oops, I'm having some light problems, that I think formed me into the person I am today. So here's a few of them, and I don't know.
Before you do it, I want to say one thing, that I want to just point out what you said was sometimes we don't know how we feel about something until we read how someone else felt about it. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think that's so powerful. I just wanted to camp right there for a second. So we don't always know how we feel about something until we read how someone else. I think that's beautiful. Yeah. So show us your books. Yeah. I just wanted to stay there a second. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No problem. So I think one of the things that is important about when you're a kid and you're reading is that what you're reading can really form the person you become. And so one of the things that I read a few books over and over and over as a child, but three of them that I have here, one is A Wrinkle in Time.
Yes.
And this is my childhood copy. One is Anne of Green Gables. Again,
yes.
And one, a lot of people have read, but not everybody, is Island of the Blue Dolphins.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So all three of these books are things that I read again and again as a kid. And all three of them have strong, spirited, mold-breaking girls as the main characters. And I grew up reading these books, and I grew up in a family where it was me and my sister, no brothers. And we learned to do everything. We were not expected to do, there's the girl things and then there's the boy things. We're washing the car, we're doing the lawn, but we're also baking cookies, we're doing everything. And it never occurred to me growing up that there was anything I couldn't do. And I think a large part of that was my reading, because these girls could do anything at all. And maybe they needed help from their friends, maybe, they needed to rely just on themselves, but they could do it. And I think that's really powerful, especially for girls growing up. And what's really nice is that I do have a 12-year-old son, and I have read him all of these books. And at first he wasn't so sure about Anne of Green Gables. You'll like her.
Yeah.
But anything with a female protagonist, I kind of had to convince him that you'll like this book. Because as girls, we read everything, but a lot of times boys don't read girl books. But it was really gratifying that he did end up really liking them. And then the other book I read most of the time as a child over and over and over again was Watership Down.
Okay.
Really?
Yes, it was absolutely my favorite book. I loved animals. I often pretended to be an animal when I was small. Maybe not so small, I don't know. I used to stalk my dog and my sister. I was pretending I was a tiger. I was told that I did it naked once, but I think I either repressed that memory or they're lying to me. I don't know.
I'm sure they're lying.
They're probably lying. So those are just a few of the books. And that's an adventure story. That's about this group of rabbits that leaves their warren and has to settle this new warren, and there's fighting and blood and there's all sorts of scary things. And the 1978 animated movie is just the bloodiest thing in the world. And I think that was something that made me, want to have an adventure, and I would play outside all the time. So those books really formed part of me. In addition to like the interactions you have with real people, you have all these interactions with these imaginary people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it changes you.
I think
It might interest you to know that a year and a half ago, I reread A Wrinkle in Time because I loved it so much. And did you know it's like the first in a series?
Oh, yeah.
I did not even know that. And my son gave me the series for Christmas.
Oh, that's
Yes.
nice.
So
Yes.
there you go.
I've read the
Sorry,
first
Ann.
3. I didn't read the 4th one yet.
I've read the first 2. I haven't gone on because Angie makes me read other books now.
Yeah, I reread all of the Anne of Green Gables books when I was nursing, and I needed a small book that I could hold in one hand, and so that was the last time I read all of them. But yeah,
Maria,
I
do
read
you have
all of
a favorite from childhood?
Yeah, I was waiting for her pile to come through, but actually, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was the one I
really?
went back
Yeah,
to
that's
a lot.
great. Yeah.
A lot. That between that and Charlotte's Web, those are my.
Charlotte's Web.
But
Lisa,
I
do
will
you?
say I quit reading the Chronicles of Narnia series when, well, again a spoiler, but Lucy,
Stop.
Susan, like they never came back. I'm like, what? I'm done.
But yeah, because he didn't always have the same characters. Yeah.
Yes, I didn't like
Yeah.
that. Even
Lisa, do you have a favorite book from Wrinkle in Time, obviously, but do you have something else?
I think it's interesting when you're talking about the girl leads in those.
The ones that you read over and over.
The Mixed Up Files, Miss Basiley Franklin.
That's mine.
Oh,
No, you can't
I
take
love
that
it.
one. That's mine.
Oh, you should answer first.
Harriet the Spy.
Yes.
Wrinkle in
Those
Time.
are both books I read to my son recently.
Isn't that
Yeah.
interesting?
Yeah.
I never put that together until Erin said that about all the girl leads and
Yeah,
that's
and
so cool.
they're spunky and they do what they want, and they're not always making great choices, but
yeah. Exactly.
But
totally
that's
agree.
life.
I moved around so much when I was a kid, and music and stories on record. I had a lot of stories like on LP, and I know that part of what you're saying resonates with me so much, because one of the first things I wanted to do when we moved and I had a new room or a new space or whatever was get my record player set up and hear my stories, because it was like, now as an adult, I realized it was something that didn't change. Like they went with me. And I think that's what it's, I could count on those people to be with me or be the same or whatever.
Right.
And
and that's kind of how Robin looks at the people in the books that she's reading.
Yeah.
Like these people won't let her down. She knows what to expect.
Yep.
Yeah. And so they provide this, I think, source of comfort or strength, or like one of the things that you said too. I think sometimes it's helpful when we're in the messy middle of something to see that it worked out for someone else or how they went, because it kind of fast forward, like we can't fast forward, but we can read the next chapter and see how things worked out. But so I think it does something for us, but I know that it also it helps connect us to each other, right? Which is like so fun when I'm like, oh no, that one's mine, or we've all read a certain book, or so yeah. And I think that's really cool. And one of the things in the book, in your book, is how the books connect Robin and Peter, right? And so talk to us a little bit about how you think that books, not only within, but also connect us with each other.
Yeah. I think when you discover that you've read the same books as somebody else or watched and loved the same movies, it creates this instant point of connection. And it also creates an instant dictionary, almost, where you have you have a shorthand with people where you can mention, in our house, we talk, my husband and I have been together since I was 15, and we've seen a lot of movies since then. And so we talk in shorthand in movie quotes all the time. And to us, it's meaningful. And to anybody who hasn't seen the movie, they're just like, what are you, it's
but that's
annoying.
okay, because it's not for them, right? Yeah,
Right.
it's for
but
you.
The same thing happens with books, and I think the same thing happens honestly with faith. When you encounter somebody in a new setting and you share the same faith, or you share the same books or something like that, you have this instant like, oh, okay, I know how to talk to you. I know that you will get this. You have the same references. I love being able to look at somebody's bookshelf and come up with some sort of idea about what type of person is this? What kind of topics might we be talking about? You do the same thing with people's music collection back when people actually had music collections. We still do, but it bothers me that everything's going digital, because that makes it harder to get to know someone. I remember when
you got to break into their phone and look at their playlist, and that's not cool, right? Yeah.
and like I remember the first week of college, you'd just sort of wander in and out of people's dorm rooms and look through their stuff and like figure out, like, do we like the same stuff? Are we going to be friends? And you can't really do that sort of thing when people have no physical media.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the great things about book club, even a virtual book club, like when we read together, I don't know, it just does something cool, I think. And then we can talk about like what we were feeling when this character did this or that, or what we liked, and, and how we connected with people. Yeah. I think that's
that was part of why I liked school so much. Like, that was before book clubs were really big. And then I went to college, and then you graduate from college, and then you're like, oh, I'm not reading all the same stuff as a group of people anymore. And you miss that. And that's something that book clubs, I think, have made up the difference for a lot of people.
Yeah. And we long for community, because we want to be known, and so we want a place where we belong, and that's our people. Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
So let's talk about your writing style for just a little bit, if you will, because both of the books that we've read that you have written, and I know these are your first novels, but I'm sure you've written lots of other things too. So I know that when I say both of your books, I don't mean to minimize the other things that you've done, because I know you've done a lot, but both of the books that we've read are in multiple timelines.
Yes.
And I just want, like, why choose that method, and how hard is it are those, like, in your mind, are those two stories at the same time? How are you making them? Just talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. I love talking about that. Yeah. So for the first book, We Hope for Better Things, the multiple timelines were necessary in my mind, because it's a generational saga. You're talking about 3 completely different parts of history. And it's tied to actual history. So I didn't want to tell one timeline story where somebody's telling you what somebody else told them. And I wanted the reader to be able to experience it firsthand. So that's kind of why that ended up being that way. The second book wouldn't have probably had to be 2 timelines, but what I wanted to do was reveal Robin's story kind of piecemeal, which is sort of how you would learn about a person in real life. When you first meet a person in real life, you don't tell them your life story. Here's all the backstory you need to know about me. Now let's go forward. You learn little things about people over years. And I still learn things about people I've known my entire life, where they'll tell you a story and you're like, oh, I never knew that. And you get this clearer picture, one more little piece of the puzzle. And so I wanted it to be like that, slowly revealing, as you would in any sort of relationship when you're getting to know someone, encountering this new person and knowing that something must have happened to make her into the person she is when you meet her. And I think that's something that I always have to remind myself of when I'm meeting somebody new, or if I haven't known somebody for very long and they do something that seems inexplicable. Just remembering, slow down, they have a whole life that you don't know anything about. Even when you encounter a stranger in a public place and you're never going to see them again, and maybe they act a certain way and you're just like, wow, that person's horrible. Why would they do that to this clerk, or, whatever. You have no idea what happened to them even that day, let alone their entire life to make them that way. So that's kind of why I wanted to use 2 timelines in this. And also, I think there's an immediacy of experiencing it along with her at both of those times, instead of being told in flashbacks, oh, by the way, this happened. But I will say that my next couple books, because yes, I have written more than 2, there's one coming out in January and then one coming out a year from January that are both written. They won't have dual timelines. One of them takes place only over a week.
Oh,
And the 2 books that I'm working on now after those 2 also won't take place in multiple timelines. So if that's why you like my books, I'm really sorry.
It's all we know. It's all we know right now. So we'll look forward to those.
And this is just being completely honest. When I first started We Hope for Better Things, I was a little bit like, oh, because multiple timelines aren't my favorite, because it feels like a lot of times it can feel like a little bit like driving a stick shift and you're not real great at it. You know, it can feel a little bit. I thought I said this, I said this in the bad review. I mean, not bad review, but like when we did it bad. But I thought you just did a beautiful job. If I didn't feel that at all. And you're like, I wasn't like sad when we went back and forth, because I felt like I was involved in all 3. And I don't think I'd ever read, girl said I don't think I'd never read a book, I don't think, that had 3 timelines at the same time. Yeah,
that was a little much.
It seemed very, at one point I'm like, it seemed very industrious, like, as you know, from the perspective of a writer. I thought this is challenging to do this so well.
Why write one book when you could write 3?
Right. Well, you could, seriously. Yeah. I just thought,
and you asked about the process or, you know, whether it was distinct stories and then put together, or if I wrote things kind of as they unfolded. And in both of those cases, I wrote them in the order that the chapters appear. So I didn't write one story and then another and then another and try to match them together. And that might be why it didn't feel quite as herky-jerky, because I did try, especially with We Hope for Better Things, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, when you end one chapter, it flows into the next in a particular way. So if somebody's knocking on a door at the end of one chapter, a door will open at the beginning of the next chapter, but you're in a different time. So it gives you a little bit of a, you know, ease into this other time. I think that's probably confusing for some people, actually, because they might think, oh, this is the next thing that happens. This door opens and this thing happens. But hopefully the labels at the top that told you the year would help.
Yeah, they do. They do.
I thought of both of your books that I've read. They're just so intriguing, but I don't, just very good. Yeah, just so good. Yeah.
You know, not just that. I just
go ahead.
like to ask a technical thing.
Yeah.
The poems. You wrote the poems.
Yeah.
Those were amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, did she get these out of a book somewhere? These are really, really good.
That would be bad. I think you lip stuff.
I think you're supposed to cite that.
I think she would have put her.
That'd be a real coincidence, but they were all about the characters that these books were.
I just thought they were really, really good. And I thought, gosh,
I appreciate that.
Yeah. First,
I do enjoy writing. I write poetry seasonally, so I'll go in these little phases, and usually when there's a shift in season is when I feel poetic.
Okay.
When I'll write poetry. So.
All right.
When you feel a shift in like season outside or season inside, what do you mean?
I think season outside is more, I think that there's just something in seeing something change that makes you think about the thing. Yeah. So you see it differently, and then that kind of gets stuck in your head. And so I do tend to do, I think in spring I'm a poet. More
I was going to say, a lot of people are fall, but yeah.
I love that. So talk to us a little bit about, do you still work for a publisher? Do you still have that also? And so you said earlier that you write like the back of books. Basically, you write the stuff that makes us decide if we want to buy the book or not.
Ideally, yes.
Right. Yeah.
Buy it. But...
Right. Yeah. Buy it. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. And so I think that's really challenging to write, like in a few words, to find the heart of the story in a few words, which I think that's what you're ultimately doing in that work as you do. What do you call it? What you write?
Copywriting.
Copywriting. Okay. And so how does that help you as a writer, or does it help you as a writer to just kind of like, find that heart? Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. I think because I've done copywriting. I've worked for my publisher for 18 years, and copywriting has been at least 15 of those. So I've been doing it a really long time, and I am really good at doing it with other people's work. It was more challenging to do with my own. It's a lot easier to take somebody else's work and boil it down to an essence than it is your own. And it's even been difficult over the past, year and a half, almost 2 years, talking about what is your book about? I don't know. How much time do you have? But I think that there are a couple things that it does help with. Number one is I am definitely somebody who edits things down. And you might be surprised because the first book was very long, but it was longer before it was published. And so when I first wrote that one, it was around, I think, 88,000 words. And I was talking with an agent and they said, well, what about this part, this part, this part, and this part that you haven't told us? And I said, well, I was a little worried that it would get too long. And she said, don't worry about that, just write it. So in my next revision, it ended up being about 120,000 words. That's a little too long.
Wow.
And so I went through and edited it down to, I think it ended up at about 103. But at one point, between one draft and the next, I lost 10,000 words, but I didn't lose any scenes.
Okay.
So it was all just the tiny nitpicky, like, don't need that word. This word could be for these 3 words, And so I think that in my writing, as long as I have time to work it over a lot, I think that what you end up with is not like it's essential to the story is my goal. I don't want to have long sections that really don't go anywhere or don't have anything to do with changing a character or something about the plot or something like that. So it's helped me in that way. And I guess I hadn't really considered the thought of how it might help in finding the essence of something, but you're probably right.
I think that's very hard to do. I think it's hard to write in a few words. I used to, when I did blog posts all the time, I would try to, like, over time, like, let's now do only 600 words. Now let's see if I can do 400 words now. And now I like microblog on these, like, just little, just like basically long Facebook posts or whatever. Yeah. And sometimes I spend so much time trying to say what I want to say in like 5 sentences, right? It's just, I don't know. It's hard. I think it's hard. Yeah.
That's funny because I think because I have to say everything in a very small amount of space for work. When I do blog, I just blather on.
I'm going to keep you here all day.
The computer is infinite. You can keep scrolling.
You have no idea how long I've been holding this in. I love it. That's funny.
That's good.
A question has come to my mind as we've been talking and switching gears just a little bit, because you write in a Christian genre. You're a faith-based novelist. And I think I think there's not a lot of Jesus in your books.
No.
And so I just wanted to ask you about that. And that's not a criticism at all. It's just curious, I think, because I think more books in the Christian genre. What do you think about this? Because you see it all the time. More that I pick up have faith value stories without like a come to Jesus calling, if you will. Right. So I don't know. Will you talk to us just a little bit about that? And what's your goal as you write in a Christian genre?
Well, I'll say straight off that it was not my goal to write in a Christian genre. Okay. It was just my goal to write good stories. And I think because I am a Christian and I'm coming from a background of faith, they're going to have a certain worldview represented, but that's not always going to be the main character's worldview. Okay. And I'm not looking for ways to insert God into the stories. Some stories will have more of that than others. The book that's coming out next, which we can talk about a little later if you want, is a spiritual story. It's a story about spiritual belief, and it's a story about how do you find belief, and how does belief find you? And I mean, it's clearly spiritual. People who think there's not enough Jesus in the books will probably like that one.
I bet you get that sometimes. Do you not? There's no, yeah.
People see that it's a Christian publisher, and so there you have a certain expectation. And then other people, because I'm involved in a lot of writing groups that have nothing to do with faith.
Sure.
They have other expectations, and they might see too much Jesus. And you can't please everyone. No. And so you gotta write the story that needs to be written in an honest way. And some of it will have something to do with faith, and some of it really won't. And I do work for a Christian publisher. And so I've worked with a lot of authors and books that are faith-based, and some of them have a lot, some of them have very little. Some of them, they have a lot, but it's metaphorical and it's masked. And sometimes those are more effective than just a straight out come to Jesus moment. And you also have to think about, what is the purpose of this story? The purpose of some people's stories might be to share the good news. That's not the purpose of the stories that I'm writing. It just isn't. And that's okay, because a Christian does whatever work they're doing to the glory of God. Jesus didn't make Christian bookshelves or, like chairs or things like that in his carpentry work. He did really good carpentry to the glory of God, and it wasn't religious in a particular way. So if a plumber is a Christian, they're not doing Christian plumbing, they're a Christian who's doing plumbing, and so in my case, in my writing, I don't think of it as writing in a Christian genre. I think of it as writing a particular type of story, which I think of as kind of book club fiction. It's stuff that has things that you'd want to discuss, and maybe those discussions would go into matters of faith. But it's definitely not, like, the reason it's labeled Christian fiction is because who publishes it.
Okay.
It's not because of like, what's the content. Really.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that answer so much. And I agree with you 110%. I'm a pastor and that's my calling. Maria's a first grade teacher and that's her calling.
Right.
Lisa was a nurse in a pediatric hospital, right? And that's her calling. And, and so I totally, we bring Jesus. We have the opportunity to bring Jesus wherever it is we are called to use our gifts. And I just I so appreciate that. And and I think there's so much value and there's so much Jesus in your books if you are looking for, because there's the theme of redemption, there's the theme of being known and seen. What she really wants, she can have in that relationship with Jesus, so I just appreciate your answer on that. So tell us a little bit about All That We Carried, right? Yes, because that's what's coming. That's what's coming next, right?
That's what's coming next. And I have a few advanced reader copies so you can see the cover.
Yay, it's beautiful.
It's shiny because that's how they are. I think it's going to be matte, but
okay.
So this is a story of two sisters who have been estranged for about 10 years. They were on a hiking trip 10 years ago, and during that trip, their parents were in an accident and passed away. And since that trip, they have gone very separate ways. So one sister kind of retreated back into law school. She developed a materialist belief in that all that there is what you see and nothing more, and that's fine. And there's nothing left of her parents. And the other one developed kind of a cafeteria style spirituality in this kind of fear of picking the wrong one and not seeing her parents. And these two do not get along great. They have really different beliefs. They have different ways that they have coped with their parents' death. And the younger sister wants the older sister to come on another hiking trip after 10 years to kind of reconnect. And she feels like, I have 7 days basically to fix all of like the last 10 years. And everything that can go wrong on a hiking trip, wrong on this hiking trip. And so they have to figure out, like, how do we do this together? And they also run into a stranger along the way who's going to impact their trip quite a bit. And what I love about this book is, I think because I grew up with a sister, we were very close in age and we fought a lot as kids. We're very good friends now. So it's not about us. We get along too well. We're not very interesting. But we do backcountry hiking quite a bit. And so I got to draw on a lot of my own experiences and our experiences while we were hiking in these kind of remote areas where you can't get a cell signal. You have to prepare for a lot of eventualities. They probably won't ever happen, but you kind of have to be ready for it. And there are some real things that happened to us that made their way into right. And it just was a story where I wanted to talk about why we believe the things we do and how often it is where we decide our beliefs according to problems in our lives, rather than starting with a belief that is based on some outside thing, something outside of ourselves, and then interpreting our lives through that rather than the other way around.
Wow.
So it'll talk about a lot of interesting spiritual questions. It's hopefully going to be something that gives people a lot to talk about.
Mm-hmm. It sounds a little bit risky to bring in other good for you. I mean that, because I think sometimes we don't have those kind of conversations. We're a little scared to ask the questions sometimes. Yeah.
Well, and I think that especially if you're with a sibling or a friend or a spouse and you're really, really close, but you don't share the same beliefs, those are the hardest, I think, conversations to have, because you don't want to negatively affect your relationship with that person, but you also feel, I have to share my beliefs with this person.
Well, it goes back to that being known, does it not? Like if you have a close relationship with someone, but they don't really know, or there's these huge things in your lives that you can't actually share or talk about, then there's a block between how am I really accepted here, or am I accepted only for the parts that you're willing to align with, or I'm willing to align with.
That's a really good way to put it. And that's a lot of what, these two will be going through.
Yeah. So. I can't wait. Spring, right?
January.
January.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we call it spring in the publishing business. We got rid of winter years ago.
Good. I like this publishing company.
It's summer and fall.
Well, you live in Michigan, so you want to try to get rid of winter, but then half your year is gone if you get rid of winter, isn't it?
That's very true.
Okay, I know we need to wrap up here in a second, but before we let you go, I just want to ask about something totally unrelated to writing and all that, and that is your love of consignment shopping. I understand. Do it right? Yeah. I understand that you love to do consignment shopping, and just why? Tell us. Yeah.
Because I am cheap. I'll tell you why.
Because you're
I used to work at a department store when I was in college, and I know how cheap you can get that stuff if you wait long enough and you have a discount. And so because I worked at a store where that was the case, I can't spend money on clothes, because I know that it's like, if you just wait a little bit, the stuff that was new 2 years ago is going to be in that consignment shop, and it's going to be so cheap. And I think that, like, there was an element of, when I was a certain weight for a while, I'm like, I'm not spending any money on new clothes because I don't want to be this size anymore, but I'm also not going to do anything about it. So it was like, I didn't want to spend any money. And then I did start losing some weight, and I had to get new clothes. And I'm like, I'm not spending money on new clothes. This is insane. So it's all consignment shopping as much as possible. And I also do sew my own clothes.
Oh, wow.
Which is a lot of fun. It doesn't save you any money unless people have given you the fabric. And a lot of people do when they know you sew. But it's a lot of fun, and you can make things that you can't find other places.
Okay, I have to ask this though. If people give you fabric, what's the chances that you actually like it though?
Yeah.
The fabric.
Very slim, very slim. But what you get is, oh, my mother is going into a nursing home and she sewed all her life and her entire attic is filled with fabric. Come take it. That happens.
Yeah.
I just made a dress this past weekend out of fabric from that exact situation. I've had for years.
Well, I'm glad you found the fabric for the dress that you want to make, because then it's like, if somebody buys you, they're like, I've never seen you wear anything with that fabric. I can't see it. That's because I didn't like it at all.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's great. I don't know if you girls have seen him, but Erin, on your Facebook page, right? You had a bunch of new headshots, which were wonderful.
Yeah.
You put a
all
note
that was
on there.
consignment.
Yeah, that's what made me know that. Yes, you put a note on there that all the clothes you had found.
Although
consignment shopping. Yeah.
I did buy this sweater at a real store, but it was on clearance.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, I don't really do consignment shopping, but I'm like, I don't buy anything if it isn't on clearance. Like, you know, so if my boys even know that, they're like, well, I'm like, well, maybe I could get a new shirt. I'm like, if you can find one on the clearance rack, you probably can. Oh, girls, what else from the book, or questions or anything else that what else did you guys want to talk about? Anything else that stands out to you?
No, I was just really big on the poems, and you already let me ask that.
We did that.
Well, I'm really glad that you were big on them, because I know that there are people out there who skip them, because there are just people who don't like poetry, and that's fine. But it's nice to run into somebody who does like it.
Well,
You
well
really
done.
liked when we did Becoming Mrs. Lewis when she put in Joy Davidman's like sonnets, right? You were Lisa
Yes.
liked that too, did
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
So I don't know that I skipped over them, but I don't know that I appreciated them the way that Lisa does. So I'm glad that there's more than one of us here.
There you go.
I just
Well,
thought
the
the
thing
whole
is,
book
I
was
was
great.
former English major, and I really do appreciate good poetry. Oh, and here's the book.
Oh my
This
God.
is the complete poems of Emily Dickinson that features in the book. And she's just, she was somebody who, when I was in high school, I was like, I don't get it. And then, you get older and you keep rereading things. You're like, oh, I get it.
Oh, yeah, that's
So
cool.
I really like her.
That's fun.
Well, that inspires me. Maybe I should take a look at that a little bit more. You know what I think? Here's a confession. I think that I don't get poetry or don't appreciate it enough because you have to do it slow. I don't do things slow.
It seems like it
and
would
I'm
be
not
quick because it's short.
No, but it's not because it's deep and you have to
Yeah, right.
I'm a deep person, but I'm not slow and I'm not that's not like I'm not complimenting myself. Like that's not a positive personality quality, but I'm like, oh, this slows me down. So and so it's just I know I'm just being honest. That's what I
Well,
do.
don't
I'm
forget,
honest.
I read it twice.
That's true.
That's true.
She
I
gets
always
extra
do.
credit.
She
No,
does.
she does not. Do not tell her that.
We'll give it to her.
Usually
was
she
so
reads
good.
and listens. It was so good. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we highly
Thank you.
recommend it. The Words Between Us, Erin. This has been such a delight. Thank you so
I'm
much.
so glad that you had me on. This was really fun.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. We would love to have you back when your new book comes out.
I would
Maybe
love
we can,
that. I
maybe
would
we
love
can
that.
set
And I
that up.
promise you, I will not go look for that old.
Yeah, I know.
Please don't.
Although we
No.
loved that book.
We did,
Yeah.
yeah, I know. What makes me think that we need to redo that? Anyway, I don't know. I may just have to erase it from history. But once it's out there, I don't know that you can really actually ever get it back.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight,
Yes.
friends. And we will sign off for now until next time. Peace.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Erin. I am so glad to have spent time with Erin and grateful that she was our guest, even though we kind of messed up by giving away all the spoilers when we read her first book. A big thanks to Erin for her grace, and I absolutely loved learning about what books have been important to her since childhood. Keep up with all that Erin is writing and doing by following her at erinbartels.com. Thank you so much for listening. I pray that wherever your day takes you, you are walking in the confident knowledge that you are a beloved, cherished child of God. Peace.